So now we'll look at tuples. And tuples will first seem boring compared to lists. And indeed, you can do less with tuples than you can do with lists, or it will seem like that at first. Later on, we'll see that tuples have one main advantage, and that this advantage allows them to do other things. And this advantage is that they are immutable. So let's see. This is how we assign tuple. So we just use round brackets, and then you see that you have now coordinates which are 3, 4. Here is another way to assign a tuple, is simply to use commas in between. And once you have a tuple, you can start accessing different parts, just like with lists. And here I can use different tuples together. So I construct here the first tuple. So this is the first way we saw with a round bracket. And then I use here an implicit bracket that I haven't written, and this is called tuple packing, to construct a new tuple, which I now assign to TT. So then if I ask to print, you see that here I have the first tuple T, then the second part, this other tuple, and the two tuples are grouped into a tuple by the implicit tuple packing. So this is tuple packing. It constructs a tuple implicitly if you separate with a comma, but you can also use implicit tuple unpacking. So let's see that now. So I have TT, which is now a tuple. So if I do U comma V equals TT, this will go in TT, open it up, and assign the first tuple to U, the second tuple to V. And similarly here, if I do AB equals UV, well, there will be implicit tuple packing on the right and implicit tuple unpacking on the left. So in the end, A is assigned U, and U was assigned the first part of TT. So you see that this worked out. And B is assigned the second part. And okay, so this is implicit tuple packing and unpacking, and then you can be creative and you can use it together to swap around A and B. So this is what happened here. I used A was this value, B was this value, and then I do AB equals BA, and I basically swap the two values, as you see here. Now, as I said, tuples are immutable, so if I take a tuple like T and I start to try to assign some value to some part, then it will tell me that tuple object does not support item assignment, and this is because they are immutable. I cannot modify a tuple. The fact is that they can still contain mutable objects such as lists. So you could have W here, which is a tuple of lists, and that's completely fine. So you could go in and modify this list, and that would not be a problem. So let's see that. I take the first entry, which is a list, right? So the first entry here, index 0, that's a list. And I go and modify it. I add 4 at the end. And then I ask to print my tuple again. And I see that this list here has been modified. But the tuple itself, if you want, hasn't been modified, because the tuple is still pointing to the same list here and the same list here. The only thing is that list has been modified, but it's still pointing to the same object in memory. Now, because of the notation, some weird things happen. So how do you define an empty tuple? Well, this is how. You just put empty to be open and closed round bracket, and this defines a tuple of length 0. But now comes a problem. How do you define a tuple of length 1? Because if I just do this, then 1 is not a tuple, right? 1 is just an int here. So to tell Python that what you really want is a tuple, you should do it like this, with this superfluous comma, or it seems superfluous, but it really tells Python that this is a tuple. So here you see that Python knows that one tuple is a tuple. So again, tuples have similar features to lists, but less of them. And so you might ask why they are useful, and this will prove to be useful only later, and it will be essentially useful as keys to dictionaries. and as complicated keys to dictionaries. And it's only possible to use tuples as keys to dictionaries essentially because tuples are immutable.